Holler if you hear me, and welcome to tonight's edition of Art Uncensored. It is the top of the hour, 10 p.m. Eastern. We are all here together to continue on with the Sword and Sorcery ladies. You saw me conclude last week with Xena, and we all had ourselves a good time with Callisto. Yes, all kinds of scary hot. Now I thought, well, let's go back into the world of Conan, the of Samaria, yes, with Valeria, as portrayed by Sandel Bergman in the definitive Conan portrayal being the Arnold movie. Yes, Sandal Bergman, who you might also remember from Hell Comes to Frogtown. She also did one of those aerobics tapes in the 80s, which those can always be kind of fun to go back, look back on, and just have a good laugh at it. Or there's those ones that were done by a guy named Ron Harris, which were actually the Ron Harris aerobics tapes played on Showtime late at night. And there also were a series of VHS tapes that were shown in Friday the 13th, the final chapter. That's what the doctor is watching on the little TV in the morgue when Jason comes to and slits his throat with a bone saw. Or also the movie Dirty Work, the creepy old grandpas. That's all he ever has on his TV when they show him at home. Yeah, there are those. I'd say check them out for yourself. There were also nude aerobics videos from back in the day. You might find them entertaining. That is up to you to see. And who have we got so far coming in? Also, everybody say hello to a new subscriber, new viewer named Master of Boobs, who comes in with hail. Instant Karma as well. Puma Fist, though, was unable to attend tonight. Well, that is okay to understand. As I said, I've got the best kind of viewers who are there and will come in to say when or where or how. If they can't go, if they're going to come, when they're going to leave, that's great. If you're going to come, yes. I like Bub66, or now Christopher also as well. That is nice, everybody. Yes, all of you, hail to everyone. That is the moment now where we all introduce everybody to everyone else. And if you have seen, also, if you follow me on Instagram, I also have something else to show you, which is this. Yes, I'll get it right there to the camera. Right there, my color version of Valeria I did earlier with her kind of outfit that's all a lot of, dark earth tones of leather and other kinds of rusted metal like that. This is what I did. Hope you are enjoying the sight of it. Also, now Nick's in the chat. Hello there. So that means we've got two of my three major mods in the place. Let's now see when Relentless shows up, because I see Nick coming on in. Everyone, he's is here. He's buzzed off sake though, so if you're ever interested in seeing Nick when he's blitzed, well, now he's got some sake bombs in him. So let's see what he's going to say or not say, do or not do, because that can be fun, but also, it can be dangerous depending on what kind of mood you're in, what mood the booze gets you into. Because for all we know, Michael Richards is perfectly fine at that Laugh Factory. Then he was downing a few things, and then when the people started to go against his act, that's when he had the big outburst, e.g. everybody on the internet who's a lefty asshole at the sight of Eric July getting $3.7 million on the back of pre-ordering ISOM, hurling those slurs like they're doing an impression of Kramer at the Laugh Factory. And also here, Vincenzo C says he wants everyone to know tonight he will speak to the marginalized groups only. Well, okay. Then that way we say hello to Vincenzo, because he's the one now who apparently is out there making sure that the representational quotas are met. Something else to display. I've shown this before, but now in these next few streams, since now it's been a real solid week past getting to the 1,000 subscriber threshold, it's now a real time for me to go up and move towards getting more and more attention drawn towards what's really the dream project, the real reason to have a channel that's really vibrant. And now the next goal, being 5,000 subscribers, is to actually get my name out there, get a real monetized following, so I can get along towards what is the real goal for me artistically, yes. And as Vincenzo collects his diversity notepad, I want to give you all a nice little look, a nice little sharper look at a creation of my own. I periodically do get asked if I have my own characters, if I ever draw my own characters. Well, I have, and here's some samples of it. Yes, I will bring out as much of the camera as I can, but here, you may have seen her before. Several months back, I think almost last year, I went and did them. And this, yes, is another promotional piece of my own creation, my own little fantasy woman. And her name is Tanya, Lady of the Blade. Yes, yes, yes. If you've been on these streams, if you've been on my videos, if you've met me in other people's streams, you know this is what I've been building towards. This is what I've been developing. This is what I've been promoting. And right now, as I show you this, it is great to see Relentless come into the chat. Yes, my very own fantasy sword and sorcery lady creation. Wanting for her to be the first bad girl of CG. Yes, Billy Tucci's been in here with She, but She has been a creation that has been ongoing since the 90s. Really, our own new, fresh, original bad girl lead comic book creation that could be up there in the hallowed halls alongside the likes of Lady Death or She or even Purgatory, the one of the other Brian Pulido creations from the 90s, or even Red Sonja. And hello to Tim Hayes coming into the chat, directly saying hail to me. This is just one of the promotional illustrations I have done, and you'll see these in my Square store. Yes, the first link in the description below, if you're watching this later, the link to my store is also pinned to the top of the chat, and you will see two separate categories for Tanya art, for illustrations, and for color drawings. And also now we've confirmed that Instant Karma is a lady, and also Orm Faye is in the chat. So right there, yes, an Orm Faye. The piece, though, there with UPS, it's going to be there Friday, ground, all right? So now, yes, this piece right here is one of the promotional illustrations I've done on that Canson comic book art board. And because of that, these are $75 a piece. These original, one-of-a-kind promotional illustrations of her. This is just one of them out there. There's other ones that are just illustrations and color pieces of characters that are going to be appearing in the comic in some form or another. And now, yes, those are my standard $25 and $20 for those up there you see. What exactly is the story behind her? Well, I will bring out a new piece because I do have some other illustrations of her to show all of you out there as I try to make sure I get eye contact with the camera while at the same time trying to get it good without knocking everything over. All right, here we are. Yes, here's another one of her. Yes, what exactly is the story behind the Lady of the Blade, as I'm calling her? As Wilford Brimley, a new viewer also from the Brofessionals stream right there that was on Billy Tucci's channel earlier tonight, has come in. Look into the soul, says Master of Boobs, as well as now Wilford Brimley is here. And what exactly is the story behind her? Well, she was a lady trained from childhood for combat, for battle, only for then her family, her life, her entire damn home realm to go and be ravaged by an entire damn near race of marauders who slaughtered her family, destroyed her home, took all its resources for themselves, and wound up abducting along with several other women and subjecting her to sexual slavery, selling her into sex slavery in a disgusting brothel, only for her to try and defend herself against her John, who promptly killed her. Except then she was brought back to life by a deal with God. To redeem her soul, she must slay 1,000,000 sinners. Thus, her first order of business when coming back to life, kill everyone in that damn brothel and take the best weapons for herself, and also take some other little markings out there to actually keep count of the 1,000,000 souls that is her goal, to redeem her soul. And if you notice there, alongside her waist, she has a nice little bag. It's a little bag. What is in that bag? Well, besides her wardrobe, every piece of her wardrobe, every piece of armor, weaponry she uses, each of them is how she keeps count of the 1,000,000 souls she plans to slay. Yes, whenever she slaughters somebody, she takes a little item off of them as a token for counting how close she is getting to 1,000,000. And one of the simplest, smallest ways to do that is collecting a tooth out of the mouth of in most of the people she kills. Of course, if there's somebody who, say, has a better kind of clothing or a better kind of armor with her, she'll go and take a piece of that off of them. You know, a better sword, better shield, better holster for her sword, better kind of belt, better kind of horse even. That's how she keeps count. But the most economical way to do that, when it comes to certain people to whom don't have anything better for her to take for herself or her mission, she'll just simply go and just yank a tooth out of their corpse and put that in a little bag to keep count. Yes, yes, yes. I also just wanted to show you here the bottom here. This is her in a wheat field. Yes, and that nice little steel G string. Yes. Or if you see colored pieces of Tanya Her G-string right there is steel. Yes, it's steel with some little straps right there to tie it in place. Yes, yes, yes. And of course, that is a tiny little shield of hers with an old-fashioned cross, because in the world she lives in, yes, Christianity, the Judeo-Christian faith, that has now completely been on the wane and is only now kept. It's actually fought and repressed. So now those who practice it must do it in secret, or go and pretty much live the life of carnies, the life of nomads, going around from place to place, doing what they can under their much oppressed faith. And thus, hence, Tanya is here to remind the world of the wrath of the Lord. Yes, consider her of the things you could call her. One of them would be the Golden Panther. Also think of her as God's wrath made flesh. Yes, most definitely. Hence why, even though this is my dream project, this comic I would want to do with her, it would not be the only one. It would be the first in a series. Something along the life of, say, I've mentioned before, the great canon of the work of the legendary fantasy novelist Michael Moorcock, a man who was a still living legend when it came protagonist fueled, plot oriented fantasy novels. Those kind of fantasy novels that are really led by a strongly defined central character with very interesting, creatively done plots leading the character throughout them. Yes, as opposed to phone book sized fantasy novels that are going on and on and on with tons of backstory and appendices and all these other little glossaries to explain the world, because those kind of the stories where they take all the wrong lessons from J.R.R. Tolkien, and what they wind up doing is they create a fantasy story that is all backstory but no story. They're more interested in explaining to you how the Gelvins wound up, or for the last 1,000 years, have been fighting the Dorfons over the rights to all the Gelvin in the world, as opposed to actually really having a real honest to God story where you have, you have your protagonist and you have the beginning, and then you go on to the world where the world, the background, those are all details that are there to make the story and the protagonist go and move along, as opposed to your protagonist just being a cipher that's there for this entire world that the writer was far too obsessed with building up. Yes, I'm very much more of the. That's why when I do not dislike Tolkien, what I do respect his work. But there is the disciples of Tolkien who've taken all the wrong influences. I mentioned before in my stream where I drew to Paul, I went and did into detail with J.R.R. Tolkien's life, and him being a man who was a veteran and an academic, him with his background in life and in his education, he was the kind of guy who, of course, here's a guy who did a nearly novel-length lecture on Beowulf in 1936 after the years he spent translating the book. Okay, that is a guy who is very much in the idea of research upon research upon research, and then you go into an interminably sourced paper dissertation on it. So yes, you have your paper, and then you have all the research and all the glossary and all the other little terms of studying and studying and studying that went behind it. And that kind of thinking going into doing a fantasy novel that was so damn long, it was split into 3 books, and then there's all the appendices of resource background details for it, yes. But that is of the opposite towards the kind of thinking that in the very least gets me going, which is the idea of having a real, beginning, middle, and end that is pulling you in, with the center of the story around the protagonist, which is what the likes of Michael Moorcock was doing with his most famous fantasy creation, with its famous sextet of novels, Elric of Melniboné. You know, the albino anti-hero, anti-Conan, to whom The Witcher was plagiarized from, and other great creations of his, like Corum, not the star running back for Michigan football. I mean Corum, the one-eyed, red-cloaked fantasy hero, who is also a different incarnation of Elric, because all the protagonists in Michael Moorcock's fantasy novels are all different. They all may be different characters, but they're all just united together at being some incarnation of the eternal champion. Yes, the hero who is incarnated in every generation, in every world of the multiverse. Yes, Moorcock came up with the concept of the multiverse before DC Comics, and every single incarnation of them is born to battle against chaos, while they are the embody of order to fight for cosmic balance. And when it comes to Tanya, yes, she is something that I'm aspiring to be in that canon. Because with or without J.R.R. Tolkien or Robert E. Howard, the man behind Conan and Solomon Kane, whatever your preference is. If you like the works of Robert Jordan or Piers Anthony, who I would say they are also, you could say, descendants of the Tolkien style, but they seem to be far less obsessed with all the background minutia as opposed to other writers. And of course, George R. R. Martin, who is far more of a darker, bitter deconstructionist kind of look into the Tolkien style, but still very much loves all his backstory and books about this thick. Yes, I still would like, my goal for Tanya is to be something in the canon of that. A real simple story, the elevator pitch for what the comics format's going to be, like a fantasy novel in comic book form. A nice, sleek 48-page piece, though, where it's very much, from plot point after plot point, with Tanya being what is going to lead you along in that world. And the world in the world in which she inhabits, there is going to be lots of detail there, but for it being a comic, being a visual medium, that background detail, those appendices on this country's backstory or that backstory, or what's the importance of this war or that war, or the histories of all these realms, those are things you're going to be able to see in the story, as opposed to dropping everything to have it explained to you text after text after text. And also now we just got another announcement about Deadpool 3 just got an official announcement, and Hugh Jackman will be coming back to play Wolverine in it. I saw Midnight's Edge did a stream today announcing that, and I saw the thumbnail was the Deadpool logo with Wolverine claw scratches in it, but I was busy, so I wasn't able to really attend to that chat and be in that stream. But yes, Hugh Jackman coming back. We'll get to see him there and really get to see the real Deadpool interact with the definitive Wolverine. And it's also not a good sign for the MCU. They are so overconfident, the MCU, about what they're about. If they were really that confident in starting the X-Men all the way over, they wouldn't have gone and done whatever they could to get Hugh Jackman to come back. How much they had to pay, what they had to do, if it involved, I don't know, like a novel, a novel-sized contract of all the stipulations and details of what he has to come back for this or not. Yeah, that is great to it'll be interesting to see him back and really see them interact, because I guess now Josh Brolin, his Marvel contract is torn up and he does not want to come back to be Cable again. So you need somebody to be the straight man to work off of Deadpool, which was something Deadpool 2 did right. And they took something from the early 2000s comic, Dick Cable and Deadpool, of making where Deadpool really works well as the wacky guy, but he needs a straight man to work off of. You had a bit of that, not as much in the first movie. I mean, there was some of it in there. You had a bunch of supporting characters who all kind of shared the straight man idea, but not really one solid character completely. Like you had with more, at least in the second half of Deadpool 2, you had with Josh Brolin. Yeah, that's apparently done with. So we're back to getting Wolverine. Wolverine being there as a full straight man for Deadpool. Okay, and it's now the most recent Deadpool Wolverine comics I read was that multi-issue run that Rob Liefeld did in the early 2000s as part of that Marvel Universe by Rob Liefeld omnibus, which were entertaining. And yeah, it's fitting that this is happening right after we saw Doctor Strange 2, where we get that parallel universe where we get Patrick Stewart as Professor X and also the John Krasinski cameo as Reed Richards. You finally get your hands on the Fantastic Four Marvel, and what is your debut with the original science hero, with the leader of the first family of Marvel? You have him job out to a crazy bitch that the writers are desperately trying to justify all her evil, and you're badly failing at it. But that's another thing for another day. And now, actually, I have some demonstrations when it comes to a real canon of where the whole realm of fantasy fiction has come from. You could say, yes, the modern fantasy as being established by J.R.R. Tolkien, but there were works that he built on, which he even translated himself, that are very much the background, the backbone of what he had inspired within him to go and do Lord of the Rings in the first place, like this. Yes, this is the Tolkien translation of Beowulf, one of the oldest pieces of fiction that is still known to man. All the way back, I believe, sometime AD in the Danish countries, yes. And of course, the actual original writer of this is not known. You could say this is part of it. Also, you have the Odyssey and the Iliad, and I do have a copy of the Iliad, but I could not find it beforehand. But I do have another one from similar era. Yes, Virgil's The Aeneid, another ongoing story adventure like that from world to world in the time of ancient Greece. There's also the Arthurian legend, and King Arthur had the story of King Arthur has had many great interpretations out there. You've had novels like the great American illustrator Howard Pyle actually wrote and illustrated his own versions of both Robin Hood and the King Arthur. Both are great, and I would recommend getting those with the Howard Pyle illustrations in them, because he truly is one of America's great illustrators, and also was great at being able to really weave a story together. There's also T.H. White's The Once and Future King, but the oldest known version, the oldest written version of the Arthurian legend is right here. Yes. Thanks to the good people over at thriftbooks.com, last summer I was able to go, summer 2021, this is the volume 1 of Le Morte Arthur, the oldest known edition, oldest known written version of the Tale of King Arthur, right here. And now Relentless wants to know if I've ever been with twins. Yes, I have. I have been with twins. I have been with twins. Yes. And what is this? What next we've got? Now we're actually going to go into the real world of Robert E. Howard. As I mentioned, I would say I respect Tolkien, but still I am not that much engaged in his own fiction. Like his translations of the epic poems of olden days or his nonfiction writings, yes. If anything, actually, I will make an exception to the Silmarillion. That is more something in line with those kind of epic poems that he was going for with his work as a translator and as an academic before he went in with The Hobbit. And what have we got here? Well, we have my whole collection right here of the Robert E. Howard works, which his idea, Robert E. Howard is far more in line with what Moorcock did with his creations. And with that, I mean having a real pulp fiction kind of influenced stories. Well, hell, the original pulp magazines, like Weird Tales, was where Robert E. Howard had his Conan stuff and his Call stuff and his Solomon Kane stuff published there originally. So the whole canon from where those kind of ancient epic poems and the Arthurian legend came from, and that being the real common ancestor, the Homo erectus, whatever, that then evolved into the real first inklings of sword and sorcery with Robert E. Howard's work in the pulp magazines like Conan, this being one of the 3 volumes that Ballantine has published to have the entire Conan canon in there. Yes. And yes, these are stories that run from being a far more simple little short kind of thing to ones that go on for several chapters to even though there was only ever one full-length Conan novel, there are still other stories out there that are much longer than what you would usually see like one issue of a pulp magazine. So we've got the Conan here, the Bloody Crown of Conan, and Conan the Cimmerian. Those being the full collections of Conan work there. And when it came to Conan, what Conan was created for essentially was that before that, Howard had written all different kinds of stories from like Westerns to even boxing related ones. But then he got into historical fiction. And initially that was where he started off with, and I see, crack open some Playboys. I want to look at some coin slots. Well, I actually do have a pretty wide Playboy collection, but I don't have that within reach right now. Master of Boobs. But before Conan, there were historical stories. Like this is a sword woman and other historical adventures. It's pretty thick because it includes all the historical adventures that he had ever written that were not related to a character that he had several stories written and published about. There are a few characters in here that have multiple stories, like the cover here, Sword Woman. That is one of 3 stories that Howard wrote about a character named Dark Agnes, who is a sort of dark fantasy prototype hero before even the likes of a Game of Thrones character or Elric, who had Dark Agnes, as well as other historical adventures in there that specifically involve, turn of the century France or medieval England, even like England of the 1800s, or even I think the Danish countries. There also was a famous sect, a sort of group of people known as the Picts, who were in their historical or pseudo-historical kind of origin was something that Robert E. Howard was very fascinated with and studied a lot, and also wrote several stories of those characters, of a particular character he did that was another character that was and before he came up with Conan, where with Conan, he was entirely creating his own world, the frustrations in copiously studying and researching these historical eras before writing any kind of story about them, whether it was Dark Actus or anything else. He figured out, hey, he could create his own world that's influenced by those historical studies and have a world where he doesn't have to worry about violating any kind of accuracy or inaccuracies. And what was another prototype for that before he did the Conan? Well, we have Bran MacMorn, the Last King, the ruler of the Picts. Here, there being several stories. I believe only 5 of these stories were ever published, and there were several more that he wrote, but that were there, but just in a filing cabinet and not published until after his death. But the famous one that he was doing, the one that first really made Howard's name as a pulp writer, was a 17th century Puritan hero who wandered the lands that went from England to throughout Europe to even several stories taking place in Africa. The puritanical heathen slayer known as Solomon Kane. And flat out, I will tell you, the first time I started reading these Solomon Kane stories, in reading these, that was when the concept of Tanya first came to my mind. In reading these and thinking of my own equivalent, my own little female twist on Solomon Kane, and thus I immediately went to drawing and drawing and drawing. And there is around, I think, summer 2020, there is, if it's still available on his channel, there was an EVS stream where I just went and asked him. I told him the name of the character and what the basic idea was, and he said, yes, you should draw that. So thus, okay, I went ahead and went and jotted down the initial sketch for Tanya that I still have. I still have it in an archive. That's something, though, that I'll probably be keeping for myself, and maybe then later on have it for sale, something a lot more valuable after actually getting things done, getting it funded, getting it printed, and all that. And the last real great example of the build-up to the prototypes that led to Conan was initially right here, Kull the Conqueror. There were only 3 stories of Kull published in Howard's lifetime, but there were, I think, about 7 more, 10 more, 12 more that were written. And one of them, By This Axe I Rule, was a story that Howard's publisher rejected. And then he took the story and simply decided to rewrite it and took By This Axe I Rule into the very first Conan the Barbarian story, where instead of looking at a place that was either rumored to have existed or to some historical land, he decided to go and take the basic story structure that he had with Kull and make it into a new character that was far more something that would work better for his publishers than what he had done with Kull. And thus, that's why people consider Kull to be like the poor man's Conan or the Conan archetype, those kind of things. And it's really not inaccurate to say that, although Kull does have his own separate charms to him. So I would still say, if you really like fantasy that doesn't go on and on and on with, chapter upon chapter of background detail, of exposition over exploration, the Kull stories are as emphatically recommended as Solomon Kane or Conan. And then in the wake of the Conan success, the wake of the Conan influence, from when those stories started finally getting reprinted in book form, yes, there actually was initial plans to have a collections of Howard stories during his lifetime, but that did not happen. And that was one of the many kind of dominoes falling in his life that led to Howard just flat out ending his own life by borrowing a friend's gun, putting it up under his ear, sitting in the driver's seat of his car, and bam! And he actually, according to the short biography in the Savage Tales of Solomon Kane volume I just showed you, what happened was that he actually survived for about 6 hours. Apparently, that Howard was robust enough and strong enough. He was able to survive 6 hours with a damn bullet blasting through his skull. Yeah, of course he wound up dying anyway, but there we go there. And there we go with the Conan stories and how they were also, Howard's entire canon was all written and published, or at the very least written and then published retroactively, posthumously, before even the Hobbit was published. So you had there and that middle ground, then came the Hobbit and eventually the Lord of the Rings. But then in the wake of the Lord of the Rings and the finally collecting Howard's stuff in book form, that all exploded and exploded. But then that's when Mr. Michael Moorcock, a man who had already been writing professionally since he was 15, yes. Moorcock had his first story published when he was 15 years old. That's how long he's been working. That's how long he's been going. And yes, I do have a Michigan shirt on. There we go. Instant Karma wants to know. That's my Michigan shirt. Right there. Yes. But it was specifically, yes, he was, and to put that in perspective, yes, Michael Moorcock is in his 80s now. Michael Moorcock is in his 80s and is still a working published writer. And he's a man so damn productive over the years, having started in pulp magazines and comic strips and all that. He's able to still, maybe he could be able to write a full novel in like a weekend or in a couple days. Now, at his age, it takes him maybe a few weeks to finish a novel. But he still gets work out there where he is very much a vibrant, creative kind of talent. And then one time, it was the good old the year of our Lord, 1961. His editor at a magazine, Science Fantasy was called, because of the popularity around the world of Conan, now with the recollections of the Conan stories in book form, he was told to write a story of a Conan-style character. Okay. Already in his, I believe, 30s at the time. I don't know exactly when Moorcock was born, but I know the first story, the first Elric story, The Dreaming City, was published and written in 1961. So what age Michael Moorcock was at that time, I do not know, but he had already long time been working professionally. So he took that story idea, he took that basic thread, followed it, but used it to make pretty much a photo negative of Conan. Instead of this buff, swarthy, destined to be a king, we have this anorexic albino drug addict who was born a king and is destined to die and is also riding dragons and monsters and all of that. And thus we get Elric of Melniboné, the character to whom is one of, I said, the many different characters who have been leads in several novels. That's another example of how productive Moorcock is. There were he wound up writing 6 novels of Elric of Melniboné that were the full original canon of the story. Since then, he has written Elric into other stories where he's appeared as supporting characters in other novels. He has also had other stories, short stories, and or Elric novels written later, like Bane of the Black Sword after the fact. And yes, Instant Karma, I am out of Michigan. That's why I'm wearing the Michigan shirt. Well, but I mentioned that there are there's the sextet of Elric novels that are canon. There's also other ones that have been written later, like Bane of the Black Sword, I believe written and published in the 80s. But also there is Erakose is another character, and also Coram. There's also Dorian Hawkmoon. Those are just the ones I can really think of off the top of my head. And I think all of them, all those different novels of all those different characters have all been adapted in comic book form. And thus we get the good people over at Titan Comics with their beautiful hardcover reprints of actually a series of reprints called the Michael Moorcock Library. Titan Comics is not only involved in reprinting the actual novels of Moorcock's work, not just the Eternal Champion stuff, but also other characters like his secret agent character, Jerry Cornelius, who was part of a series of novels that Moorcock has written over the years as well. That's just how damn productive he is. But also all the comic adaptations of them are up there and available. All 6 of the canon Elric books have all been reprinted. I have 3 of them, thanks to Nick. Also, there was one, actually, it was another one of the Sword and Sorcery Eternal Champion characters that Moorcock created called Erakose. But Moorcock actually wrote an original comic book for the Erakose character called The Swords of Heaven, The Flowers of Hell, which was painted by Howard Chaykin. I showed it on the channel recently. That was a recent gift from an Amazon wishlist from Nick. Thank you for that. But also, I do actually have this. Because of just how popular and in print form Moorcock's work is in comics or in the original novels, his stuff has been reprinted and reprinted within an inch of their lives. And when it comes to the sextet of the Elric saga, there was at one point a 2-volume hardcover reprint of all 6 books. This is volume 2. This one right here with that nice little ornate illustration includes also This was one that came from thriftbooks.com. So this copy came with this random picture of, I'm guessing, whoever was the woman who owned this copy before and its dog. But let's see. This one collects the volumes 4, 5, and 6. And although this is actually a bit of an overlap because Stormbringer, that was the last novel in the series. And I also own the comic adaptation of that as well. And I've said before, these stories, though, the way that they were adapted so well, those Elric novels, into comic book form, that you can read those comics in lieu of reading the original text. Actually, yeah. And it's or if you've got the disposable income, you can read the comic adaptations and the original books and compare one to the other. All right, now with all of that, I've just been noticing, thanks to Nick, with all this talk, it's now time to actually get to the drawing part. But I'll explain a little bit that further. Yes, if I can get my and also Instant Karma, her son is having a birthday, so everyone say happy birthday to Instant Karma's son. So now as we get into this, I got a little delayed in explaining the whole background, ancestry that I want Tanya to be a part of. Yes, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Instant Karma's son. Happy birthday to you. Yes, and many more. Yes. That is something to bring in there. Oh, yeah. Oh, and Guilty Gearhead as well. Hello to Guilty Gearhead, who's also now here in the stream, in the chat. It's just going, and when it comes to the world of Tanya, it is something that I have a lot of explaining to do, although it's quite ironic considering I like fantasy novels that really focus on having an interesting protagonist and a story instead of having too much damn backstory to explain. That's like a bump. That's a real road with me, a real roadblock with a lot of modern fantasy and science fiction writers. I think that's one of the reasons why I love Moorcock so much, because he was a writer who started out in the pulp magazines. So with that, he really had drilled into his mind, like Robert E. Howard before him, the concept of you really got to have a story that, okay, you got to really have a little tight, a short and sweet, exciting kind of story that we can sell, all right? Because that's where you are going to go and actually have a career. Making these things that are going to be interesting and tight and something that's going to be memorable, and maybe that you can really do a series of this instead of going and doing, one story that's 1,000 pages. Why don't you do 1,000 pages that are, 20 pages, 1,000 stories that are 20 pages? That's the idea, at the least for me, and I think that's why, yeah, the Game of Thrones series, actually, yeah, that's one of those situations where I agree with Rodney Dangerfield in Back to School when he's talking about how all these different classic works. He saw the movie. It's like, oh, hey, who's got the time? In the movie, I meant now 2 hours. That's the thing with Game of Thrones. I mean, have you seen how long those are? When the show was really reaching its peak in popularity, and I was still regularly visiting this Barnes & Noble when I was living in Orlando, I mean, who's got the time for these, Chinese phone book-sized novels? I go to the show, and, episode by episode, I'm in and out in 45 minutes. And also, I get a lot of nice tit shots, but it's a lot of tit shots and sex scenes with a lot of English accents. So that means it's not softcore porn. That means it's sophisticated and adult. Even with nude scenes that include that are played by they have American actresses on the show, but even they still have to go and put on English accents. I can't help but notice. There's that one scene, and of course you'll know why I know this scene, but I've never watched Game of Thrones, is some guy who's been poisoned, and there's some woman in a jail cell who has the cure, and also she's pulling down her dress so she can taunt him with her tits. And she's got like a little pixie cut and all that. And that actress is American, but of course it's Game of Thrones, so you have to go and all the ponderous dialogue is justified because it's British. It's a bunch of British accents. It has to be great TV. It has to be sophisticated. Even when you've got a queen who gets a man to show her loyalty she gets herself a goblet of wine while ordering him to take off his clothes, and there her eyes instantly dart to his dick while the audience just sees his ass in extreme close-up. Then again, if Emilia Clarke was there and ordered me to get naked, I'd immediately drop trow as well. knowing that what she'd have would certainly delight her. Hell of a lot more than what happened with that mascot. I don't know if you've seen that clip, but I believe it was like a Houston Rockets game or something. It was an NBA game where the mascot for like the local team was there on the courtside and then stopped and kneeled because there at courtside was Amelia Clark. I think it was the Houston Rockets. It was an NBA team with like a mostly red color scheme for their uniforms. And yeah, their mascot was dancing around the court doing its mascot thing, and then went in there. There was the Mother of Dragons. So it must stopped. And oh yeah, honestly, that would be I'm not a furry. Okay, I much prefer though to not be in the costume while being with her like that. And Huron of Alexandria is in the chat. Yeah, she made it. It's a long drive from LA, but okay, it's worth it for us to go and delight and entertain you, and also to inform you that I would immediately do it if Amelia Clark wanted me to drop trow. Yes. One simple statement of take off your clothes with that sexy little English accent, and I'd do it. There'd it be. Except there would be a loud thud on the ground as it happened. It reminds me of that joke George Carlin did once about giving out advice to people. Like, if you go to a hotel that has sewing kits, sew the towels together. That's a fun bit. Or another one was if a man goes into a bakery, ask them if they can bake a cake in the shape of a penis. And then if they go and don't get offended, if they ask if they have a picture, if you have a picture to go by, just go, no, but I tell you what I'm going to do for you. Drop the pants. Order more flour, Helen. And we've got Dead Punk Gage in the stream as well. Yes. No, my tongue would not be the one flopping on the floor. If I was dropping trow for Amelia Clark, it would be something else. It would be a different kind of leg. Yes. And also, I would be far better at it than just porn slamming her angrily because I'm just a big dumb animal like Jason Momoa in that early season of the show. Yeah, what was it, like season 1 or something, where she's just laying there getting plowed right there, like she's back on the casting couch. And yes, Huron does understand that. Yes, she is quite a sexy little girl. No, she's a naughty little girl. Yes, she's a sexy little naughty girl. Yes, that's preferred. Sexy little naughty girl. And also, as we've seen, how she looks on the show in Game of Thrones, and how she, and depending, you can either, it's another example of like a Madonna horror complex, where you can dress her up and make her look like a cute, nice girl, or as we've seen on Game of Thrones and in some photo shoots she's done for like Esquire and the like, that she can also be a smoldering little cum monster who utterly dependent on getting stuffed with dick, or she just flat out needs it. She'll scream, "Where is my cock?" No, wait, better. Where are my man whores? That was for the X-rated episodes of Game of Thrones, where she would scream, "Where are my man whores?" And speaking of more cock, of course, I mentioned it in the video earlier today, but even though George R. R. Martin is more, his style of writing is more in the phone book-sized, trillions of years of backstory to explain kind of fantasy novels, as opposed to the concise story with a strong protagonist-driven story, fantasy works of Michael Moorcock. He actually is still a fan of his work, is actually friends with him. And I did see the clip. There is one early episode of Game of Thrones where that evil little boy prince who gets poisoned during the middle of the show's run, there was he's there amongst his like a consort or whatever, and he has a sword, and a great sword should have a name. What should I call it? And out of the crowd, you hear a bunch of names, and the first name you hear, the first suggestion for a name is Stormbringer. Stormbringer, as in the living sword that Elric of Mel the Benet carries. Yes, Elric's signature sword, Stormbringer, a living sword that consumes the souls of whoever it kills. Yes. And the Elric character had such a profound popularity and influence in the 60s and 70s that what was it? Blue Oyster Cult did a song about it called "The Black Sword." Hell, Deep Purple did the title song. They actually did a song about it that was the title song for their album. Yes, Deep Purple, Stormbringer, the album and the song. Coming out of nowhere, something like a rain, Stormbringer dance on the puppet again. Yes, Black Sword, Blue Oyster Cult. There's also the progressive rock band that Lemmy from Motorhead was the bass player for before he started Motorhead. Hawkwind actually was so entrenched. They had several songs inspired by the Elric character, and even had Michael Moorcock himself appear on stage and do dramatic readings of the works of the Elric books right there. Yes, for them. That's how entrenched they were. And they even recorded it as a live album. And there was also Domine is a Italian metal band where all their material, all their songs, all their albums are about Elric in some way or another. Yes, the character has a very large impact, even though he's somebody that, at least in America, like fantasy novel nerds really know him better than what's the mainstream. Where the mainstream, they know Game of Thrones, or unfortunately, they know the damn Witcher, which irrefutably plagiarized him. I mean, come on. He's an albino wandering swordsman whose nicknamed the White Wolf, has a raven-haired sorceress girlfriend in a world where he is fighting. He represents a battle for order versus chaos in a world originated by an event called the Conjunction of Spheres. Good Lord, you fucking thieves. That's more, yes, the Andrzej Sapkowski being the writer of the Witcher books. Thief. It also is not a good look for defending it when Sapkowski, before he became a writer, worked as a translator. And yes, this was in communist Poland, where it was a government operation to translate fiction from other countries, to fitting the Soviet censorship. And he first wrote the original Witcher story, 85. The original Polish translations of Elric books were released to the Polish reading public in 1986. Yes. And also with their Guilty Gearhead, phone book fantasy, as Razorfist calls it. Well, that's the idea. That's the idea. It just does not interest me. Tolkien really is. I'm saying there's the people who take the wrong influence or the wrong understanding of what makes Tolkien work so well. So it's the most droning, the most blandly academic, most uninteresting kind of fantasy, of phone book fantasy. Yes. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm not against this. And or here's actually another detail when it comes to another way to describe. There's those nice little quick elevator pitches for one story or another. And when it comes to something I've described to people Game of Thrones, for those who don't know it, and I've described Game of Thrones as Bob Guccioni's Lord of the Rings. Yes. Or for those who don't know who he is, Penthouse, Lord of the there's the Lord of the Rings to Penthouse. Yes. I mean, as a Huron of Alexandria brings in the detail that yes, the Daenerys, Emilia Clarke's character in Game of Thrones, she has servant girls finger her in the books, and I'm guessing that was one thing that Emilia Clarke wouldn't do. They did convince her to go back to doing nude scenes in the later seasons of the show, but they still did not convince her to go and get fingered by servant girls in any of the any episodes. Considering, maybe they should have cast Lucy Lawless in the part, since one of her post-Xena roles was on the show Spartacus, where you saw her there on camera getting fingered while she is talking to somebody about what to do to stop Spartacus. Yes. Or Lucy Brawless, as you could call her on the show. Then again, she's so damn sexy, it doesn't matter if she wants to wear a bra or not. I'm certainly going to be for it. And I cannot do the Xena cry, so I'm just going to leave it to her. Although I wonder if that Spartacus show was produced by her husband or not, considering, she married Robert Tappert, one of the producers behind Xena, and of course, because Robert Tappert made his name on the Evil Dead franchise as the producer there with Sam Raimi, of course, they had him as one of the producers on Ash vs. Evil Dead, and of course, the main villain on the show was Mrs. Robert Tappert, Lucy Lawless. That's the best Xena I can do. And other things here I want you to know, yes, in the Game of Thrones books, Daenerys got fingered by servant girls, as well as getting plowed by dudes, and also getting completely naked over and over and over again. And Emilia Clarke's beautiful petite little body with those blowjob lips, those expressive eyes, and that gorgeous accent with yes, yes, yes. Although at the same time, she has had aneurysms, several aneurysms, to the point where now she is literally missing parts of her brain. And I wonder if being on a show like Game of Thrones led to somebody literally fucking her brains out. I wonder, is Emilia Clarke the world's first example of somebody literally having their brains fucked out? And with all this, Huron would also like you to know that she is a mix of everything. She's very much a race. She's mixed races of all kinds. Yes, yes, yes. And at Lord Nemesis, yes, that is correct. Fingered by servant girls, the mother of dragons, fingered by servant girls. And according to Huron, she says that the first season of the Lucy Lawless Spartacus show was great, and the prequel, yeah, they were fantastic. Well, I never saw those shows. I just saw advertisements for them, and Lucy Lawless was on there. And yeah, that was on Stars, I remember. Then after that, then on Stars came Ash versus Evil Dead, where she was the main villain on there. And well, that's not the kind of show where you're going to have her, there in a very sheer dress while she's talking, making a villainous plan, and she's got servant girls fingering her while she's making evil plans. And of course, for those who hungered to see her naked for all those years on Xena, but it being, it being basic cable, being a first run syndicated TV, you would never be able to see that. Now you finally got your wish. Of course, though, if you did see her sing the national anthem at a Anaheim Ducks Detroit Red Wings playoff game in 1997, you would have seen her there singing the national anthem, and then she raised her arms up and her tits fell out of her top. So that would have been fun. Of course, I didn't go to that game. I was left at home with my sister. But that we were okay because we stayed home and watched Xena. She loved the show. I loved the show. She actually could do the Xena battle cry really well. But now I'm probably now really, really frustrated and angry that I loved Xena, but didn't get the chance to actually see her breasts. Although probably where they were seated, I probably wouldn't have gotten like the best, sharpest view of it, unless I looked up at the Jumbotron, maybe. Then probably I wasn't there, so I don't know where they were seated. But if they sat front row or not, but either way, front row seats still, that depends on someone's vision. Now, somebody could have no, it wasn't at the Joe Louis Arena. It was at the Arrowhead Pond. I was I was living in California at the time, so yes, it was a Red Wings at the Mighty Ducks. They were still the Mighty Ducks. Yes. That was around the time where you had there was the Mighty Ducks movie. Then Disney went and had the resources to go and start an actual NHL team with the Mighty Ducks. And there was also the Mighty Ducks cartoon that was part of the Disney Afternoon. I remember the VHS of like the pilot episodes for the show. Yes. The theme song, Ducks Rock, and they're flying around in space. And there are asteroids shaped like hockey pucks, I remember. And the villain was voiced by Tim Curry, who was great in anything he does, no matter how goofy, whatever. I'd love for more of Tim Curry's like serious theater work to be taped for people to see. Says now with a stroke, he can't really act anymore. So it'd be great to see like theater productions he did of stuff like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, or other legitimate Shakespeare works, performances like that, to have been captured for us all to enjoy. Here's fun. Yes, in the 90s. Yes, back instant karma in the 90s, where the Red Wings were that team that always dominated in the regular season, but then choked in the playoffs over and over until 1997. They finally got over the hump and finally won the Stanley Cup. And yeah, the season that my dad took my two older brothers to go see, and there they got to see Xena's breasts. That was 97 season when they finally won. The year before, they set the record for the most wins in a single season and still choked in the playoffs to, I believe, Colorado, who then proceeded to go and win the Stanley Cup that year. But the great thing was the Colorado Red Wings rivalry was the 97 playoffs, where there was that great bench-clearing brawl where even the goalies started fighting. I believe that was the moment where the Avalanche goalie Patrick Waugh got his nose busted and it wound up being bent and twisted like Lombard Street. I don't think he's had it fixed, but yeah, he had a like normal-looking nose, but then he had that brutal fight with Chris Osgood, where Osgood fucked him up so much it just twisted his nose in like 17 different directions, and it stayed like that. I think it's still like that with Waugh. Oh, yes. But that's for I know I would have certainly enjoyed, but it was made up to me later on when I was 9, I was there in the crowd at that episode of Raw. It was the Monday Night Raw before WrestleMania 17, where Trish Stratus stripped down to her bra and panties and was crawling around barking like a dog. Yes, there I was, and still I maintain my promise that if I ever had a convention and I would see Miss Trish Stratus there, I would go to her table or booth or whatever, and I would tell her about, oh yes, I was there in the crowd when you did that. Yes, it was a very much a big, very early puberty moment for me. And Spider-Fan, yes, I am aware of the works of Frank Thorne outside of Red Sonja. I've never read them, and I know they're like out of print. Yes, like Lana and Orgita. I also know that Frank Thorne actually he did a R-rated sword and sorcery Red Sonja kind of character that was published in Playboy. But that's something where those pieces because they're out of print, I wound up removing them from my Amazon wish list. I still have some volumes of those Dynamite reprints of the original Frank Thorne Marvel Comics Red Sonja stuff, but there's that stuff. Yeah, that's the Frank Thorne's work. He's the kind of guy where no wonder he's one of those artists that has those artists' editions of his work, because the work he did, not just the great work of drawing titties, but also being able to really do fantasy art really well. No wonder he's got those artist editions that go for like $100 cover price, where it's the large size. It's in the original dimensions of the page, where it's stuff like 11 by 17 page size book with all little details of all the little markings of what original comic art looks like before you go into the printing process. That's another big one, though, for me. I'm very familiar with is besides the comic adaptations of Michael Moorcock work, there's also the great misunderstood cross-gen comics. They were a comic book publisher in the early 2000s. They were a comic book publisher founded by a tech millionaire, where they did not publish any superhero-related work. And they had this giant universe full of interconnected titles where they had all these writers and artists who they actually had under their thumb as salaried employees. Yes, they actually had they were all their moving expenses to come down to live and work out of the CrossGen headquarters in Florida were paid for by the founder, Mark Alessi himself, where they were under contract to go and do like a page a day artistically. They were artists. They worked and worked and worked, and they had great, brilliant fantasy comics, the best American fantasy comics that aren't adapted from fantasy novels, I would say. Stuff like some of the flagship titles like Mystic and Zion. But the big one for me is Sojourn. I have the first 18 issues of Sojourn. Yes, the Sojourn was the great sword and sorcery, Lord of the Rings kind of inspired story they did, where the whole like 30 plus issue run of the comic was reprinted in trades. Like certain ones have not, like Scion was one of the 4 launch titles they did along with Mystic, but Scion and Mystic were not done. They were not fully reprinted in paperback form. Sojourn was, and I have the first 3 volumes of Sojourn in trade form. The other 6 volumes, I think it is, I have those on the Amazon wish list. Those, and I don't care what anyone says about him tracing. Greg Land is a brilliant, talented artist, and I'll take a guy who's able to produce lush work like that efficiently because of the use of photo reference than I would with any of these hacks doing this terrible, terrible stuff for DC and Marvel today, like the hideous new Tim Drake comic where, oh my God, what is that abomination? Even a drugged out blue hair exclusively doing comics on Tumblr, drawing digitally with one of those Wacom tablets would be puking at the sight of how hideous that work is. Look at that, and then look at any page of Sojourn drawn by Greg Land, and you'll see why. Yeah, Sojourn, Scion, what's that? Meridian is another one. Meridian, Mystic, and Scion are the 3 of the 4 flagship titles when CrossGen started that I love and look at. And I've got I love the work of Meridian. Mystic is one that's, to compare them, Mystic is more like an Art Nouveau inspired kind of a Harry Potter story, where it's a world where there's academies to learn magic, where magic runs everything. And yes, it's like Harry Potter, where there's witchcraft and wizardry schools. And Scion is more of a King Arthur kind of story, Prince Valiant inspired story. And Meridian is more of like a fantasy tale, fairy tale. There's a young girl, female protagonist, and it's very much more inspired by like kids' storybooks than any of the other 3 that I mentioned. And Sojourn also is directly going in there and doing the Sojourn is the most explicit J.R. Tolkien Lord of the Rings kind of story, to the point where how much Lord of the Rings inspired is Sojourn? The protagonist is named Arwen. And Instant Karma wants to know if I'm an Amber Heard fan. Absolutely not. I'm not a fan of Amber Heard. No, she's a... if there was a hurricane, I want to see a hurricane named after Amber Heard. I'd call it Hurricane Cunt. There'd be the weatherman. I'm right out here now in the middle of Hurricane Cunt. I would sooner love a blue-haired lesbian, Christopher, than I would love Amber Heard. I'm right here in front of Hurricane Cunt. She's destroying everything in the city, whether it deserves to be destroyed, if it's guilty of anything or not. I know now Helen Gronow and Instant Karma, they are new subscribers on account of seeing me through that Umbrella Guys channel. I want you all to circulate that now. If the next time that there's a Tug stream, or if you're with any other friends of yours through the Tug streams, remember, and circulate that. Hurricane Cunt. And it'll be a picture of Amber Heard. Instead of those hurricane fronts that you see on the Weather Channel, or on local news weather that always looks like dicks, do one that looks like a picture of Amber Heard. Yes, for Hurricane Cunt is now moving into Florida. That's I'm guessing now maybe this new hurricane is just Amber Heard wanting to wreck shit because she saw, yes, it's Johnny Depp is going to be down in Florida for something. And now let's go and get this one last little line in there. And now we have ourselves a finished Valeria. I thank everyone for watching. Of course, if you're new, subscribe. If you're a returning viewer, check that you're still subscribed. And everyone, the best way you can support my work is through my Square store. Shop in my Square store for my artwork. Penning pieces like this are $25 plus shipping. Color drawings are $20 plus shipping. Sketchbooks are $25 plus shipping. Any item, any sketchbook in any size, they're only $25 plus shipping. Besides that, do not forget, absolutely positively, do not forget to go and remember, you can commission any kind of artwork you want. Pen and ink illustrations like this are $50 plus shipping, and the last item in my illustration categories. Color drawing commissions are available at $25 a piece plus shipping. They are the last item in my color drawing categories. Or you can go and commission a trading card. Trading cards, those commissions are $20 plus shipping, and they're the last item in my Coffee Sleeve Super Babes category, and those are only $7.50. And once they're done, I am done. And to Lord Nemesis, I thank you twice. I'm not sure for what yet, but I will thank you twice. I'll go look back up early in chat to see. But besides that, do not forget also you can simply donate. You can donate any dollar amount you would like to support me. Any dollar amount would be appreciated. And those dollar amounts can come from anywhere around the world. Besides that, do not forget that whatever you buy only comes with one flat shipping fee of $5 for one or several items, no matter how much you buy. But remember, if you live outside of America, my store cannot, everyone out there, the Amazon wish list is also linked in the description below. Since Instant Karma is asking about that, in the description below is my Amazon wish list, right there below my social media and all that. And yes, the last item, the last link in my description is to my Amazon wish list for Instant Karma. For anyone else, if you feel like that, okay. But yes, absolutely, positively, do not forget, if you live outside of America, if you want to buy or if you want to commission, you simply have to make your payment as a donation due to how my store has functioned. So remember, whatever you buy, just all the items you want put together, including $25 for the international shipping fee, and your items will ship immediately. So do not forget that, and do not forget I'm going to be live again tomorrow night at 10 Eastern. I will be premiering again a new video at 6:30 Eastern. So to Nick, to Huron of Alexandria, to Vincenzo C, to Relentless, Orem Faye, Instant Karma, Bub66, Lord Nemesis, Guilty Gearhead, to Tim Hayes, to Sora Cloud 22708 debuting in the stream as well, to Spider Fan, to Mr. Wilfred Brimley as well, and to some of my new ones like Master of Boobs. I thank you all, and remember, felines, slam it, lick it, suck it, and see you, Space Cowboy.